Here we go. I've just been lip syncing for the last few seconds. You'd think I think I'm up to my 27th show. You'd think I'd have this all sorted. So there we go, Rosie. We're back. And good morning. So anyway, I was going to do the show as a mime and see how good your guys' lip syncing was. But good morning to you. Or what I was saying, well, strange enough, good morning and welcome to everyone both here in New Zealand and around the world. We have people watching Solid Ground all across New Zealand and across the world, which is amazing. If you want to comment, if you've got any thoughts as the morning goes on, well, make sure you do. This is live. We're on Facebook, we're on LinkedIn, we're on X, and of course we're on YouTube. So if you want your comments to come directly to me here in the studio, if you're on the Facebook page of Family First, or you're on YouTube, those comments will come direct to me here. And so I can read them and I can do amazing things like this. Well, amazing to me. To say like Rosie saying good morning from that beautiful place in Taupo. Lovely to have you along. So guys, a number of topics this morning, everything from the COVID inquiry to the Prime Minister's latest, what I'm going to call it a gaffe, certainly a gaffe of thinking that he wants to arrest Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, and a few other topics in between. But apologies as well, not only for getting things late, but part of the reason I was running late was sorting my coffee out this morning. So as you'll notice, I was a few minutes late and then forgot to unmute myself. If you want to be part of my Mugs for Mugs campaign, of course none of you are mugs, I might be, know that you can hit me up at, just come to actually simon@familyfirst.org.nz and let me know. Actually, the first batch of these mugs are heading out this week. Thanks to all of you. I was going to kick this one as well. Thanks to all of you who jumped on last week after the show and said, hey, Simon, we'd love a mug. I've obviously emailed you back. We're asking if people are prepared for, I think it's about $10 to cover the costs of couriering them to you. Sorry, I've always had a problem saying the word couriering. It's something I always have to slow down and work on. But if you'd like one of these mugs, get in touch. As I say, the first set are going out. And while we're on it, can I say good morning to the lovely Natalie? I know Natalie. And so good morning to you. I hope, if I might, you, Stephen, and the little one. Matthew, sorry, not Stephen. Matthew are doing well, and the little one. So yes, good morning, good morning. So guys, as I say, quite a few topics. Why don't we start with what I thought was a pretty substantial one as I'm looking down here to find it. Here we go. Obviously, last week and just after Solid Ground, the government, well, it was an independent inquiry strictly, but anyway, it was the first report into COVID was released. And look, we could spend the entire show discussing this, but I thought I'd just pick up two broad themes. And we might actually start around the media side. And it's not actually to pick on Heather Duplessis-Allen here. She's just one example of this. But it's been quite remarkable with the release of the report and its conclusions, rather diplomatically written, I might say. But actually, the report, I wouldn't say it's damning, but it's pretty... Actually, I'm trying to find the right word for you. I'm not trying to be diplomatic because, look, it's no smoking gun. It hasn't come out and condemned everything that happened. But at the same time, it's been pretty, well, damning, actually, of the government of the day. Excuse me. Our government of the day, particularly around the mandates and around the vaccination program. It doesn't agree with all the objections which New Zealanders have made. But one of the very striking elements which has come out of this report is, look, the government basically misargued or wrongly argued about the vaccinations, particularly when they knew, and we knew this before the report, but we knew that it was not helping transmission. In fact, if anything, the vaccination was, would protect you, but it wasn't stopping transmission. And so the idea that you had to get vaccinated to help other people, that you were going to help stop the spread of transmission, were basically just lies. And look, very early on, actually, that was becoming apparent. But what Tony Blakely, the author of the report, or the chair of the report, noted was that not only was that happening, but the mandates were just so broad and comprehensive that they were unnecessary. and had caused an enormous amount of pain and harm, and a lack of social cohesion, which is one of those moments where you go, well, of course it's broken down cohesion. I mean, we divided society. So I'd say overall a good report. Obviously, a lot of people would like it to be much further and stronger. The good news on the further side is that the government's got a second independent inquiry starting, and it's going to be looking at more broad issues. So this first report, the one that has just come out last week, was, excuse the bad use of word, but mandated by the Labour government. They chose to start. It was particularly narrow in its focus, but as I say, quite remarkable what the chair of that review panel, Tony Blakely's come out with, including saying against a number of journalists who were critiquing him. He says actually he found a lot of people who opposed the vaccination, opposed the mandate, to have a lot of reasonable points. And of course they did. Like all these debates and discussions, there's a wide range of views. And the problem we faced, I remember it in Parliament, and I remember, obviously, well, I can remember right up to today, there's been a range of voices and views, but during the COVID years, as the government managed things to be the single source of truth, huge frustrations arose. In fact, I think it's in the report, if I've seen the reporting correctly, that comment of Jacinda's that I'm the single source of truth really did enormous harm. Now, whether or not it was intentional at the time or a throwaway line, who knows? But exceptionally damaging. As to her later interview where she said she was happy to divide New Zealand into two sets of people. So it's no surprise, is it, guys? There's no surprise that New Zealanders are much more or less cohesive society, and I think it's going to take a long time to fix. Just quickly, and I've come back to the review and Heather Duplessis-Allen. So Amanda's been in the garden. Good morning. Actually, I was in the garden briefly. I was trying to work out, there were 3 very little birds attacking my rose bush. I should know what they are, but I don't. Terrible, isn't it? So we've got Manawa. This is, I assume, around the COVID times. Look, I think fear was a big part of it. Very big part of it. Chris, of course, down there in lovely Napier. In fact, I'm going to be mentioning Napier later, mainly in regards to something that TVNZ's done. So anyway. Good points here by Amanda. Yeah, you got to follow the money around a lot of this. Enormous amounts of money. And to Tina, good morning. Lovely to have you back. And a lovely comment here by Amanda. I think this is about Jacinda. She did know, I think, as time went on, actually, that sort of power, if you will, that ability to manipulate lives right across the country with relative ease, which just became attractive. The other quick point I'd make on this, because I should move on, is just how the media, or some, actually I should be clear about this, some in media now seem to forget their own role in what happened during the COVID years. And so, not all of them, but a number of them say, no, we need an apology. They're, rightly putting pressure on the likes of Jacinda Ardern, Ashley Bloomfield. As I noted actually on Straight Talk last night, that's another one of Family First live shows. Isn't it striking how we've heard nothing after this report from those who were always speaking hour after hour, day after day? So we've heard very little from Chris Hipkins. He's obviously running for the hills. In fact, he's trying to tell us that no one was forced to take the vaccination, which of course is the lie of the highest order. His fallback is that, well, you could have made the choice not to. We just destroyed your lives. It's a false choice or false lack of choice. So look, just crazy. But he's not really wanting to speak much. The Prime Minister, of course, granted in opposition, but was no voice at the time of any degree on this. Doesn't want to speak. Of course, nothing from Jacinda Ardern, nothing from Ashley Bloomfield. It's remarkable is that Michael Baker, Susie Wiles, all these people who were very happy to opine into your and my and everybody else's lives. Yes, just quiet. And Rosie nails it. It's deafening, but it's also telling, isn't it, Rosie? I would make sure. Anyway, yeah, madness, and some very lively feedback from Amanda about Straight Talk last night. Thank you, guys. So look, that's all I really wanted to really put out there is one, well, actually three things. The report's out there if you didn't know. Two, it actually makes some very good, I think, conclusions around how government and others, including media, overreached. And I suppose that's the third point. Media, unfortunately, and it's one of the reasons I think their trust is declining, were very complicit, in lockstep, if you will, with the government. I remember at the time, because of course I was in Parliament, got an inside view of a lot of what was happening. There was just to be no alternative narrative. You either supported the government or you got no cut through whatsoever. I remember using social media and writing to get different viewpoints out. And if those viewpoints were not in line with government thinking, it was very easy to get attacked or marginalised or mocked. Now, that's part of a free society, but I think media needs to realise they're in lockstep. So it's a bit rich, as I say. I've got this image up here now of saying, Labour owes an apology. Well, I think they do, but I think media does as well. So, yes. Hey, jumping on... oh, yeah. So I just seen this from Marae. Yeah, she's actually a beautiful way to finish it. There's just cricket. It's remarkable. It'll be interesting to see when the second report comes out. But as I was saying last night on a panel show, I'm not optimistic there'll ever be any apology. I think, unfortunately, many people right across actually society, if those friends and families of people who were effectively abusive said, look, if you don't get vaccinated or you don't do this, you can't come to my house, you can't play with my kids. So people like that, all the way through to the government of the day, they don't want to remember any of this, which is a little bit sad. Speaking of governments, this, I think, is an absolutely appalling situation which has developed yesterday. So if you're following obviously you have to be following Israel, Gaza, and the International Criminal Court put out a ruling about a week ago, I think it was, and an arrest warrant for Prime Minister Netanyahu, and then for an attempt, I better stress that word, an attempt to look balanced. They also put out an arrest warrant for the leader of Hamas, knowing full well that he was dead. So it's quite remarkable that this was even done, an arrest warrant on a sitting head of government, and particularly in the situation that I think has a lot of nuance. And I would hope, actually, that most people would agree when it comes to the conflict happening in the Levant at the moment, in Gaza, Israel, would realise that, there's a lot of grey, if you will. It's not just black and white. And look, I am very much someone who believes in the right for Israel to defend itself. You'll know I'm very clear that the likes of Hezbollah and Hamas are terrorists, and this mad Islamist behaviour needs a response. So look, I'm more towards the black, if you will, or the white on this conflict. I think it is easier to determine who's right and who's wrong. But I would still add there's an enormous amount of grey. And yet the ICC, the International Criminal Court, has blundered on in and issued an arrest warrant, which in and of itself, guys, is outrageous. I won't spend all the time this morning going through what's wrong with the ICC. But what is absolutely, I don't know, is it appalling, shocking, but it certainly shows a lack of knowledge around foreign affairs, is New Zealand's Prime Minister said that he would see Netanyahu arrested if the Israeli Prime Minister came to New Zealand. Now, this is outrageous on a whole number of levels, and really, look, it's incredibly disappointing. I worry at times the lack of foreign affairs acumen in the current government, and this just illustrates it at a number of levels. I mean, first and foremost, just about all our allies, doesn't matter if it's Australia, Canada, America, the UK, no one has come out and said, oh yes, we'll arrest Netanyahu. To be fair, some have just obfuscated, sort of sidestepped, others have been clear they just won't do it. But for whatever reason, New Zealand's Prime Minister just decided, oh yeah, we'll do that, we'll arrest a head of government if he comes here. So again, a bit of lack of diplomacy at work. Secondly, and by the way, none of this is in a particular order. Secondly, Israel is our ally. They have an embassy here. We have representation to Israel. We trade, we share information. We are, as I say, allies. And somehow, New Zealand's Prime Minister thinks it's a great idea to say, oh yes, we will arrest our allies' Prime Minister. I mean, just absolutely ridiculous. Again, trying to tie oneself more loyally to the ICC and the wider UN dynamics is, I think, absurd, particularly in the current environment. The other is, and then I'm going to, what I think is one of the most striking faults in all of this, government here in New Zealand, and you'll know I chaired the Foreign Affairs Committee. Now, that doesn't make me a great expert, but it means I know a few bits and bobs. I know when we've challenged governmental decisions before, or certainly our government departments like the Ministry of Foreign Affairs around various quite problematic issues. I remember around dealing with the junta in Myanmar, or what we used to know as Burma. Long and short, we were being told, well, we shouldn't do anything drastic. We just need to dialogue. And the same has come out with various other countries and groups around the world. So, diplomacy means that you keep the door open to discussion. And so I suppose it's a rather circuitous way to say to you guys that if New Zealand's leadership had its head screwed on and wanted to act diplomatically, if you want to have any engagement or say into what's happening in the Levant, then what you would do is keep those doors open and not say you're going to arrest the head of government. It's just absurd. I mean, look, Netanyahu's not coming down. He's not going to be losing any sleep at all over this. It just makes New Zealand look like an amateur outfit with stupid statements like this. And as I mentioned last night, I think unfortunately it shows a lack of acumen, a lack of ability and knowledge in the foreign affairs space, because while Luxon is more than happy to arrest Netanyahu, he's more than happy actually to be like a grinning, I don't know what you want, a Cheshire cat, shaking the hands of this man. This is President Xi of China. And if you want to talk about bad people in the world, this guy operates at a whole different level. And you guys know very clearly my views on communist China. This guy is an authoritarian tyrant. He's responsible for a whole myriad of what you could call crimes. Obviously, the concentration camps, which over 1 million Uyghur Muslims are involved with. In fact, as a side note, Volkswagen just shut down their massive car plant in the Xinjiang province at the moment because of slave labour that's come from these Uyghur camps. Of course, they crushed the democracy in Hong Kong. 47 mainly young people now in prison. Jimmy Lai, Andy Lee and others are still facing trial for daring to speak freely. This is a man who is overseeing a regime which persecutes house Christians by the tens, if not hundreds of thousands, members of Falun Gong. Obviously has suppressed Tibet, whose armed forces daily threaten the people of Taiwan. But here we go. New Zealand's Prime Minister, granted there isn't an ICC ruling against China, because I know darn well China's not going to abide by. I'm not even sure if China's part of the ICC. But if you want a sort of a moral balancing, here is New Zealand's Prime Minister, more than happy to be shaking the hand of a genocidal, tyrannical authoritarian. And yet here, simultaneously, we're more than happy to arrest the Prime Minister of Israel. And as someone else pointed out last night on Straight Talk, it shows a lack of moral compass, and it really, you can possibly hear it in my voice, it frustrates me no end. Now look, there's nuance in all of this. I don't think we should be arresting either of these people. If you want to know, I don't want the ICC putting out arrest warrants on President Xi. I think New Zealand needs to trade. In fact, I don't have a problem with New Zealand's Prime Minister meeting, per se, the President of China. But don't go around grinning like a Cheshire cat, shaking the hand of this tyrant in photo, and then trying to, big note or appeal to the ICC and against our allies by saying you'll arrest the Prime Minister of Israel. I think it's just very, very bad. And look, won't surprise you, a number of comments coming through from different ones. So thanks to Tracy there, to Manawa, Amanda there as well. We've got a lovely message from Philippa. Good morning. And yeah, good question there. I mean, look, it's just so frustrating, guys, that this even happened, and I'm disappointed. I shouldn't be surprised, but I'm disappointed. Thinking of that, and just actually, it's segueing away from Israel, but on the China issue, this popped up the other day, got a little bit of coverage. This is a tweet that was accidentally put out by the Trade Minister. And why this is important, other than it's embarrassing, it actually just shows you how irrelevant New Zealand is, particularly to China. Or rather, it just should put us in our place to a degree. So don't get me wrong, we need to engage with China. It's still an important part of our trading relationship. But I think at times New Zealand has an overinflated sense of just how important we are to the likes of China. And so for me, the takeaway from this was not that it was an accidental tweet, but actually our Minister of Trade was going to a dinner, which actually didn't happen in the end, which in itself is telling, but don't know who they're dining with. I mean, that's not so much unheard of, guys, but it just shows you how unimportant you are. Hey, come and have dinner with us while you're here. We're not actually telling you who you're having dinner with. You don't even know what the official's going to be. And that's got two problems. One, generally speaking, is courtesy. You'd like to know who you're dining with. And secondly, we should have learned from the past when New Zealand politicians were made, if you will, to meet with people they shouldn't have. I think it was actually National Party MPs, not myself. Went over to China and met with the head of their state security and so forth. In other words, you'd probably like to know who you're having dinner with, but this is just a reminder that the fact that New Zealand's delegation didn't even know who they're having dinner with just tells you how unimportant New Zealand is to China. So anyway, that's just an aside. Disappointing. But again, it's a small thing. But I just thought it's telling. I mean, how many of us go out to dinner without knowing who your guest is? And the fact is that New Zealand delegation really didn't know. Just a small reminder. And of things I'm receiving on a governmental side, another report that came out this week was the sinking of the Marae. I probably won't talk about this for too long. Famous last words. Look, this remains an embarrassment of the highest order. I think it's a sixth of our fleet has now sunk over $100 million. I think others have pointed out it's even more than that. But long and short, the Navy released a report a few days ago, an interim report, which noted why it sank. It's because they didn't turn the autopilot off. And I have to say, and no pun intended, that's still sinking in for me. Because as I understand it, I mean, the Chief of Navy was pointing out there literally is a button on the console behind a Perspex screen that by process they should have looked at. They didn't. And over the course, I think it was 10 minutes, I'm happy to be corrected, but it wasn't over a few seconds, but over a notable period of time, the ship remained on autopilot and ran aground onto the reef and then sunk. And there are some suggestions, but I want to stress, I have not verified this, that the engines weren't turned off, which is why we ended up with a fire and part of damaging the vessel. So look, it's absolutely appalling. And people need to be held accountable for this, actually, right up to the top. We've got, obviously, the captain of the ship. By the way, a lot of people I know can get caught up into the DEI stuff and so forth. I think myself, we can park most of this to the side. It's just that the captain of the ship is responsible. I mean, that's just an absolute given. And rightly, she was praised, and the company of the ship was praised for getting themselves all off safely. That was a big win. But now they also have to take the responsibility that they drove a sixth of New Zealand's naval fleet onto a reef in peacetime. It's just absolutely shocking. Questions for the Chief of Navy, questions also for the Minister of Defence, who in those early days effectively mocked New Zealanders who were asking questions and saying, look, there was human error involved, and they were mocked. So I'd like to see a lot more about this because amongst many things, it's an embarrassment to our nation. Big time, I can tell you with my contacts overseas, they're laughing at us. This is, again, incredibly embarrassing. The other is, as you all know, life is tough at the moment. Finances are tough, and we've managed to sink the ship. Bonnie says it sounds like sabotage. Well, I'd say in this case it's not. I think, it's just incompetence of all those involved in the command chain and those on the bridge. Again, it's absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely nuts. And then Light Force has got a comment there. Sorry, it's a bit too small for me to read. Simply Green notes too, it's grossly overpriced. Yeah, well, look, big debates around that. But long and short, it did cost a fortune, and now it's sitting at the bottom of the sea. So not good at all, or at least. So yes, there's that. Sorry, there's got someone coming down my driveway. I'm just seeing who it is. All's good. It's not the police. Thinking of still, these are just a few little vignettes, and I better roll up. Just to put in your mind, this is a fraud case, or a potential, alleged, let's stress that word. So Marae was run by a Ngāti Pāti Māori or Māori Party MP. Long and short, it appears, or the accusation at least, is that they've been collecting data from the vaccination drives and from the census to then use that data to help the Māori Party campaign. Now, let's be clear, these are alleged, but what is striking is just how long this investigation is taking, an audit amount of time, and it's still dragging on. And I'd love to know why it's a sensitive issue. Is it because it's got something to do with the marae, makes it somehow different? I don't think so. And look, the Waipareta Trust, or at least John Tamahiri and others are linked into this, as said, to Party Marae. For me personally, from the little I know, where there's smoke, there's fire. But why I wanted to point this out is, one, they still haven't come to a conclusion. The other is, of course, why is it so sensitive? If this is the fraud that they are suspecting, if there's complicity by the likes of Stats New Zealand, why is it sensitive? Is it that there's somehow threats, again, if you critique groups like this? I mean, it's like when we've seen some of these pro-Hamas protests and the likes on the street, or even those who were trying to counter-protest the hikoi, they get arrested or pulled aside because of the threats from others. I mean, what is sensitive here, basically, guys? What are we talking about? This is just a comment around the vessel that sunk, sort of on the more technical side. Yeah, I think the crew, Lightforce, thought it was the thrusters were malfunctioning without realising that they were fighting the autopilot. I mean, just crazy. A couple of very quick things on media. I thought this was just appalling journalism by Radio New Zealand. And look, I shouldn't be surprised. I mean, their journalism, by and large, is absolutely terrible. So that's Chanel Lal, or whatever his name is, and this is response to Australia banning under 16-year-olds accessing social media, or rather they've signalled the intent. They don't know how they're going to do it. So a couple of very quick points of why this is absolutely appalling. Journalism or reporting by RNZ. I mean, firstly, it's the usual whining from this type of activist that, oh my God, we're not going to be able to get what we want. Think of these small communities. I mean, actually, it's just an absurd argument. But what's fascinating is the Radio New Zealand reporter at no point pointed out who this guy is, other than celebrating that he's a queer activist. He's an abuser, effectively. He was one of the people who is regularly actually on social media abusing people, and there's a myriad of examples of vile, aggressive language, death threats. One of the big instigators, actually, about the Posey Parker protest and the violence which happened there. So I think it's, again, terribly remiss of RNZ to not even mention any of that, or even just to say the man's controversial, because he is. And yet here he is being held up as sort of a paragon of virtue when it comes to social media. I mean, you don't want this guy anywhere near your children because of the language that he uses. It's abusive. As I say, what he's done around Twitter, I think in particular, it's just terrible. And it's just not appropriate. And so, again, to be put forward here as some sort of paragon is wrong. They don't mention that he is now employed, I believe, by Parliament and by the Labour Party. No mention of his political affiliations or activities. So I suppose it's just a very circuitous way of saying it's just what mainstream media do not tell you. It's just ignored. So it's effectively a puff piece that this person is, I don't know, somehow a role model. As I say, his language, the abusive language he uses, the fact that he was part of stoking up the violence against women at Albert Park, all of that is just ignored. So just bad, really bad. And then I think it was on last night's news, and I've nicked the screenshot from someone. Hope you can see that at the top, which I've circled. Actually, Simply Green's got a very good point here, jumping back to this. As I said, they'll make Candace Owen and others to be threats. Exactly right. Candace Owen, unlike this guy, is not on Twitter screaming obscenities and abuse at people. And again, the Radio New Zealand had no comment. If you read this article, don't bother. But if you read it, it's just a puff piece for this guy. So it's very sad, unfortunately, but that's the state of the play we have. And this just shows you poor reporting. This is for the Napier crew, so Chris might be interested in this. I think, as I understand it, and why I'm drawing your attention to this is, again, how media, in a sense, make things up. So I think it was a story about a truck driver who couldn't get work, which in and of itself is quite sad. But TVNZ, I believe, then decided to sort of show there's just no jobs, and they indicated there's no jobs, which may or may not be true in itself, I don't know. But to illustrate the point, they did this search onto, must be Seek, the employment app, Seek. Seek. Long and short, you can see they've completely misspelled drivers, which of course was brought up that they can't find anything. So as you can imagine, this was done to illustrate that there were no jobs in Napier for truck drivers. But as you can see, there's nothing for drivers. I just thought it was quite funny in a sad way. Guys, there's, as always, 50,000 more things we could talk about, but I better leave it there. This is not the last solid ground. I'm going to do a couple more before Christmas, so we can get back to there. A reminder, if you'd want one of these stylish little mugs, which actually I'm going to take a swig out of. Simply Green's nailed it. Truck dribbers, I can't even say it. It's not that coherent. But as I say, if you'd like one of these mugs, email me at simon@familyfirst.org.nz. I can flick you some details. As I say, we're just asking people to cover, not the mug, to cover the cost of getting it to you. A reminder, of course, that we are busy writing as well. So Bob is continuing his McBlogs. He does a couple every week. His recent one, well, recent as of starting Solid Ground this morning, he's probably written another one. He is wonderfully prolific. He's been talking around the COVID inquiry and his impressions there. I wrote just a couple of days ago on the Candace Owen situation. I was going to talk about that more this morning, but long and short, talk about her being banned and just how actually inappropriate that is. And obviously we've still got everything operating on RCR, as this was an interview from a couple of weeks ago, but for me it remains a really cool one. In fact, I'm sitting down with another academic this week to talk about free speech, so that'll be quite cool. I'm looking forward to that. And as you know too, there is no shortage of other Family First content, so I'm just going to roll this little clip for you.
If you're looking for news that you can trust, commentary on key family and social issues, and conservative conversations, go no further. Family First has them all. Monday nights, live at 8 p.m, Straight Talk with our panel. Tuesday mornings, live at 8 a.m, Solid Ground with Simon O'Connor. Wednesdays, watch for the latest episode of Pulse Point to drop. We watch the news so that you don't have to. Thursdays, live at 5 p.m, Political Playback with Bob McCoskery and Simon O'Connor discussing the week in Parliament and politics in general. Plus, there's regular episodes of social commentary with McBlog and interviews on family matters throughout the week. You can watch these live and also on demand on our website, Facebook page, X, Instagram, LinkedIn, and on our YouTube channel. Finally, something worth watching that you can trust. Go to familyfirst.watch for more details.
So there you have it, guys. No shortage of content through the Family First network there. Bob and I back on Thursday with Political Playback. Looking forward to that. Obviously, no shortage of discussion. Guys, have a wonderful day. It's been marvellous to chat with you this morning. Thank you to those who let me know in the first 20 seconds I hadn't unmuted myself. And again, for those of you who are expecting one of these, I'm putting them in, or they'll have already been put in the mail as of yesterday or today, so they'll be headed your way. To others who want them, get in touch. But in the meantime, have a wonderful day. It is great to have you all here. And, enjoy Tuesday. Enjoy the week.